Well, one of the trending topics in the media at the moment is the demise or the death of the dinner party landlord. And I guess they mean the accidental landlord, the amateur landlord. And I'm joined by Mike Morgan of TDS to discuss that a little bit. And Mike, why do you think the media is kind of focusing on these headlines? Obviously, they're catching on to all the challenges that are facing landlords.
Well, I think we are experiencing through our scheme that there are a large number of landlords who perhaps didn't even choose to be landlords. They've inherited a property, or they've had to move jobs or what have you, and they're left in the position of having to rent out a property by circumstances rather than choice. Yeah. So we do find with those landlords that they're not as well informed as they perhaps need to be. I think some of them are also a little bit scared because they've heard a lot of myths about tenancy deposit protection. They've heard this talk of this large statutory penalty if they don't get their paperwork right. So for us, it's very important to be able to interact with those landlords, to be able to educate them, be able to inform them, and give them the tools to help them be able to register their deposits with us quickly and easily.
Indeed, because there are many threats that landlords are facing. Clearly, Section 24 is probably the biggest threat, increasing legislation, energy efficiency issues. And the problem is that most of these amateur landlords, it's not really on their radar almost until they're affected by it, and then it's almost too late. So really, I think, you know, this category of landlord, in order to survive, they are going to have to raise their game.
They are going to have to be more educated, more informed, and a little bit more, I think, proactive about how they deal with things. I was surprised this year at one of the industry conferences to be asked by a landlord, am I supposed to do something with my deposit? Which is quite surprising after 10 years of tenancy deposit protection. But I think it's for that reason that we work with organisations like the Residential Landlords Association to offer our tenancy deposit protection as a sort of combined package, because I think it's great for independent landlords to have access to that wide range of advice and guidance. We obviously deal with the tenancy, the deposit, the dispute. RLA deal with a much wider range of issues. So we've tried to help with a one-stop shop, I guess, to advice, information, education.
It is quite astonishing that there are landlords out there that aren't aware of TDP. I mean, I was standing next to Ben Beadle at the Property Investor Show last year, and a landlord with 40-odd properties approached him and said, I've never protected deposits. What's all this about? And that really is quite scary, bearing in mind the heavy penalties. It is.
I hope that we're on the tail end of that now, and people are getting the message, but there are still some that don't get it, are not aware of it. But as I say, I think easy to access guidance, information. It's very easy to comply with the legislation. It's very expensive if you don't. And of course, ignorance is no excuse, but we'll help landlords do that quickly and easily.
Well, indeed, to that end, you have produced a number of resources, educational resources for landlords. You've got the TDS Academy workshops that they can attend. And actually, there is so much information out there. There's, as you say, there is no excuse for ignorance anymore.
No, and I think it's a shame that landlords maybe sometimes feel a little bit intimidated by the prospect of being a landlord. As you say, there's a load of information available from us, from other similar organisations that are there to help. So let's get those landlords on board and comfortable.
I think particularly where there is so much bashing of landlords in the media as well, we as a community have to perhaps draw a distinction between an uneducated landlord and an actual rogue landlord that, you know, admittedly is knows that they're doing things wrong. We can make that distinction, but actually in the eyes of the media they don't. And in fact, as we've said, there is no excuse not to comply with legislation. So I think as a community we have to work together to educate as well, don't we?
We do, and I think for us education is vitally important. It helps us, I think, promote the early resolution of disputes. I think with all of deposit return arguments, the earlier it's resolved, the more likely it is that an agreement can be reached. things like our end of tenancy guidance, our code of practice, our adjudication case studies, all of those things are really there to educate landlords and tenants about what should happen at the end of the tenancy and what the outcome to typical disputes will be. So yeah, it's all there on the website, it's all available on request.
So do you think we will see the demise of this type of landlord, or are they going to have to raise their game if they want to stay in the sector?
I don't think we'll ever see the demise of it, but as I say, I do think landlords will need to be informed and educated to stay ahead of the game. We've seen a number of pieces of legislation introduced over recent years, more than the number, and it is constantly changing and evolving. So good advice, good information has to be the key.
And I think, just in terms of Section 21 as well, very common thing we see on property tribes is that they haven't protected the deposit correctly and served the prescribed information correctly, so they can't issue a Section 21, and that can put a landlord in quite a perilous condition. It
can. We still get cases where people contact us to say, what do I do next? Often the advice is you may have to consider returning the deposit. Some landlords think, oh, okay, that's not too bad, but then they forget that there is still the statutory penalty behind that as well, up to 3 times the deposit. So a simple mistake can be an expensive mistake.
Indeed it can. So I think our joint message here is that landlords do need to educate themselves, and there are many, many resources out there to do that. Indeed, TDS supply many. They've got the academy workshops, many useful resources on their website. So well worth landlords spending a bit of time looking around your website, downloading your end of tenancy checklist. All good stuff for them to be a good landlord.
That's the aim of the game.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mike.